So the play is called Suit, which was not a title. If you had asked me at the start of Boiler Room, I would have thought it would have become. And so we went through the process with Dr. Loon and sort of unpacking the ideas of what I was trying to get at. And we talked a lot about, masculinity, femininity, body identity, and even cross-dressing. And then this sort of clothing kind of idea started to form, based also on the fact that I really enjoy wearing suits. But it came to that, and it came to this idea that, what you wear is your everyday armor, and what you wear is the way you want to express yourself. So then it was interesting to me that everybody had to put on a suit at some point. So not literally just a jacket and tie and like a trouser kind of combination, but anything you wear is a suit. And so the play kind of developed with these 5 characters who I didn't actually particularly write in terms of going to get a suit or whatever. It just kind of found its way in. Everybody was wearing something or obsessed with the way they looked in clothing, or, obsessed with a certain, that trope lah. So then I thought that actually using the idea of the suit could be quite interesting. And then I accidentally wrote a narrator, which I didn't intend to write in the beginning. Because there were 5 characters all in very, very different worlds, right? They may not even interact. But then to kind of play with the idea that they all sort of come together at a tailor's, shop, like, ish. I don't actually say they're at a tailor shop, but you kind of get the idea. And then, so the tailor can encompass all these things, can sort of see everybody's journeys in the way that they choose to make their suits, in the way that they... Because when you talk about bespoke tailoring, it's really about creating something that fits you, that really is made to measure, right? And all these characters are trying to find something that fits them, I think. I identify as butch. Basically, I've sort of grown up always thinking that the boys have a lot more fun. Like, like you can run around without a shirt on and things like that, and you're not like, there are less rules to play by. And I've always kind of been more comfortable in men's clothing. And then I realized that there's a lot of people like me out there, like who also, think it's cool to look this way, or you feel comfortable dressed this way. But then nobody really talks about it. Like, even when I was doing my interviews for the research phase of Boiler Room, and I met up with about 5 or 6 people, what happened was nobody really wanted to talk about it. They were kind of a bit shy about, like, oh, but I'm not really butch, I'm more like andro, or I'm like... So there were all these terms being like, flown around, and nobody really wanted to talk about that. And then I just thought that actually it's very important, because it kind of cuts deep into more than just my personal feelings. It kind of cuts deep into, like, why does society have standards on how you carry yourself, which is a personal thing. So I was very intrigued by that. When we think about drag, we think about drag queens, we think about women, men cross-dressing as women, but we never really kind of pay attention to the implications of women cross-dressing as men. The fact of the matter is, you walk into a room, you see a man wearing a dress, you're going to talk about that more than you're going to talk about the lady standing in the corner in a shirt. And to me, that is like, okay, great, I get away with it, right? But then there's a problem inherently, I think, if you don't unpack that as well. So I was very interested in looking at why is it okay for women to dress in men's clothing, but not quite the other way. It also then dawned on me that it's just very unfair to the boys or the men who do that, because if you think about it, the journey of your gender, your search for your gender identity is the same for both sides, right? You're both confused, or you don't feel like you're in the body you're supposed to be in. If that's the same thing, so why are we more accepting of one than the other? I set out to write a verbatim play only because I like the concept of verbatim. I like the concept of telling real stories, based on real people, and so I sent out an open call to interview people who identify with the term, and then surprisingly got like very little response. And I sort of then, okay, asked my friends and things like that. And then people were sort of coming up to me and it's like, oh, I saw the open call, but I don't really identify, so I don't really want to be interviewed. But I managed to get about 5 or 6 people to talk to me, which then it's not enough for a verbatim play, I feel, although it could be. But I felt like the research there was kind of not enough because I only have these 5 stories. But then it kind of came to a point where I was like, I can try and force all these people's stories together. It would still be an interesting play. But then I have no personal stake in writing it, because I would just be presenting other people's words and other people's ideas, which is fine, I guess. It could work as a performance. But then I felt like, if anywhere, Boiler Room was the safe space to look at myself and how I identify and how I am positioned to this work. And then it kind of felt like, okay, look, it's time to put your own, to kind of open up and say, maybe I'm one of the interviewees. I didn't actually interview myself, but I kind of started sort of writing these short segments, about 5 or 6 pages long. Shit, that's very long, but just segments of stories from what I remember from my childhood growing up, from what I remember with my interactions with people, and then kind of pairing it and matching it with the experiences of all the people, these 5 women. That was about 5 women and 1 trans person. Yeah. So I was at City Hall Starbucks, and this was quite early on in the process. I think this was February or March this year. And just sort of looking at people around me, and from the way they were dressed or the way they carried themselves, I just started writing internal monologues. So there was 2 things I did. I either wrote an internal monologue for that person, or I wrote my sort of rambly reflections of what I think they were wearing and how that reflects on them. And that sort of helped me kind of realize really how gendered everyday life is, right? And how you could create archetypes just by the way a person is dressed, which was very scary because I didn't get a chance to talk to those people, right? And I was just forming opinions about who they were in my reflections and in the way I was rambling, without even getting to know them, without even getting to sit down with them and talk to them. At that point, I was also interviewing people. One of the characters is actually based almost wholesale on this person that I met. When we were at the M1 Fringe, the talk here, when it was Bitch Meets Butch, right, yeah. At that point, I was at the stage where I was writing all these sort of personal things together with the interviews coming out and things like that. And so what I had shared was one of the personal stories that I had written, which then ultimately got kind of cut up and then mashed up and then found its way into one of the characters. And then we kind of came to this place where that Dr. Lun was like, look, okay, try this exercise. So he gave me he asked me to think of 5 different sort of categories or different labels, or actually I don't know, I can't remember what was the term that he used, but 5 criteria, I think that's the word, 4 or 5 criteria, and write a specific character based on each one. So then the next time I came back, about a month after that meeting, I presented these 5 characters to him in various levels of development. There was one specific character that was really, really long. I had written 15 pages of just text about this person, and then there was a character that's 3 pages, not fully developed yet. And all through the way, it was very free. It was how do you feel? What's your impulse on this? Do you feel like this is where you want to go? And then I would say to Dr. Lun, yeah, I think this is where I want to go. And then I'll go away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks to write, or a month, and then we'll come back for another meeting, and then we'll talk about where I am. Then after that, we sort of tried to weave everything together, and then there was a draft I submitted that was very, very messy because all the character stories were just going haywire. And then it kind of then be okay, maybe it's time to kind of really let the characters breathe. I kind of came back to where I wanted to start, but with, and to say that these characters are completely fictional is also not, true, because they're based on stories that these people share with me. They're based on off-the-cuff things that I've heard, when I'm out socializing and being with my friends and stuff, and based on my own experiences. So to say that it's a, completely fictional work is not 100% true. But to call it a verbatim play is also not 100% true. But I kind of feel like I found like a middle ground. I'm actually really nervous about the reading on Monday. Only because I've been cut out of it. I chose for that to happen now because one of the things, Casey did leave it open to me and say, do you want to direct the read? But I said, I think if I do that, I cannot separate the playwright self from the director self, and that's not fair to the play. So I'm simultaneously a bit happy but a bit upset about why I'm not in part of it. They're right there now. To be honest, at this stage, which is why this reading is making me very nervous, I'm not 100% sure if this is the right structure for the play. And I guess that's why we're going into a test read. And I keep telling myself that this is why you're testing it, so that you know whether you need to switch things around or you need to. I won't say I have a year for dialogue. And in fact, this is the first play I've actually written. I've never written anything else before this. And because my work primarily has dealt with devised verbatim work in some ways, I'm very used to hearing this kind of interview format, kind of, personal sharing. So on one level, it's because this is what I'm used to. But on another level, for me, I've always kind of felt like these characters cannot exist in a vacuum just within the play. So the choice to reach out past that, the choice to kind of directly address the audience, was also one of the reasons why I wrote it in a monologue heavy form. I just like work that reaches out past into the audience and kind of directly addresses them. I think it makes them sit up and pay a little bit more attention, and I think it makes them really question what you want to question, because you're kind of manipulating them anyway, right? So, yeah. Part of this was also my journey of accepting the idea that I was butch. Because of basically how extreme these terms are, it kind of tries to force a queer person back into the binary. But now at this stage, I'm realizing that it's not a dirty word. It's to say that I can have power over my own expression. It's to say that I identify like this. I like, I like that term, right, that to be used on me. But it's also to rewrite the rules of what that term means to me. This is my first time writing a full-length play. And prior to this, so on a very basic level, prior to this, I had never thought that I could be a playwright. It was quite funny because thinking about it, it was because somebody had sort of made fun of something I had written a long time ago. I mean, childhood scars, right? But so then to be thrown into this process and to have to write my own play was very refreshing for me, because it was like, no, you may not be the best playwright, but you can write a play. You can put words on a page and you can create characters, and for me that's very empowering as an artist, to know that I have the ability to do it. To have gone through this process is very helpful to know what the steps are, where you'll end up, I think, which has been extremely, extremely, extremely humbling and extremely helpful, I think. Yeah, I'm going to look back on this experience and be like, I'm going to be quite sad, actually, I think, when Boiler Room ends, because I don't have Dr. Luna and Casey to run to anymore. I really think Boiler Room really gives you the benefit of being able to fail, right? We look at failure as such a bad thing, but actually it's part and parcel of the process. And Boiler Room is that cushion, I think, that kind of says, look, yeah, okay, it's not a bad play, it's not a good play, but these are things you can do and things like that, Otherwise, outside it's very absolute. Once you put out a product, you put out a product, and then, if it's bad, it's bad. But at least Boiler Room says, this is the product, okay, how do we develop it? And I really enjoy that process. I'm going to miss that process, because I think that's a privilege that we don't really get.